Hi, friends. You are listening to the EntreEd Talk podcast, where we feature amazing educators and entrepreneurs showcasing how you can bring entrepreneurship into the classroom. We believe entrepreneurship is for everyone. I am your host, Toy Hirschman, and I am so glad you chose to join me on this journey. Let's go.
All right, everyone, welcome back to another fun episode of the EntreEd Talk podcast. I am so excited to have round two with our super fun friend, Josh Reppun from Hawaii. Josh, we interviewed Josh, wow, way back, Josh, in episode 40, right?
Yes.
That is so cool. So
Yeah.
welcome back. We are now in the hundreds, baby.
That's awesome. Congratulations. Congratulations. Wow. That's amazing.
They haven't canceled me yet. So this will be so fun. Josh is a dear friend of ours and such a fun guy. So Josh is the founder of Josh Reppun Productions, which makes films about innovation in education in Hawaii. He is also the host of What School Could Be in Hawaii, a podcast that features innovative educators across the Hawaiian Islands. And we again interviewed him way back in episode 40. So much has happened since then, and we are so excited to learn all about that. And I just also want to say, and I think I can speak for our audience too. Thank you, because Josh has thrown so many people our way that are just, I mean, out of control, extra special, above and beyond educators. So this is just really exciting to have him back, and thank you. And I'm sure this is going to be a fun one. So since we last spoke, can you talk a little bit about what's changed in Hawaii and what's going on now and what's going on with you as well?
Absolutely. Actually, Toy, I wanted to lead by thanking you. You've jumped the gun here and you thanked me before I could thank you. It really, really was fun, Toy, to send all those people, those Hawaii people your way to your podcast. I think that there were, 7 or 8 of them, somewhere around there. And you can't imagine what a blast it was to listen to your episodes with these Hawaii people, as I was driving, to my ocean swim or to work or whatever it was. And I think I would love to provide you with one quick update about one of those guests. One of the people that I sent your way was Shorn, who is the capstone coordinator at Hawaii Preparatory Academy on Hawaii Island, which some people call the Big Island. And he's also one of the co-founders of Nalukai Academy, which is an entrepreneurship, product-based, challenge-based, problem-based summer camp. And Aaron was named by Hawaii Business Magazine as one of Hawaii's 20 for the next 20, which means 20 individuals who are going to be shaping the future for the next 20 years. And there's this epic photo that they took of Aaron where he's sort of down on one knee looking off into the distance, and he looks like some sort of a Viking. You'd have to picture that. But Aaron was so stoked to be named one of Hawaii's 20 for the next 20. And in fact, Aaron is actually leaving Hawaii Preparatory Academy now and moving to the mainland. His wife is going to be taking on a job at an independent school in California, but Aaron is going to be moving Nalukai Academy forward with more energy now. And one of the updates there is that Nalukai now has like 100 applications for only 25 slots for this summer, which really tells you a lot about how entrepreneurship and education and place-based and challenge-based and culture-based education is moving forward. And I think that's truly exciting. It just means that there's momentum, and it means that parents are starting to really understand the ways that these kinds of programs can make help their kids be most likely to succeed. So anyway, it's just, and I'm so grateful that you guys took on these Hawaii people and did interviews with them. It was very cool stuff. So anyway, so as to the update on what's going on in Hawaii. So I woke up this morning and I went out and got the paper like I always do. And I was sitting down with my coffee and the paper, and lo and behold, there's an article on the front page of our Honolulu Star Advertiser about a consortium of public high schools that are working with our Chamber of Commerce to develop these pipelines that address unemployment issues that are coming up as a result of COVID. So kids in high school are getting opportunities to actually build resumes, interview, and then actually start into jobs that are available right now while they're in high school, so that they can start gaining experience in the workforce. And many of these are very entrepreneurial type situations. So there's a really interesting need, which is a lot of businesses are struggling to actually find somebody to work, right? And then these people are working as liaisons between schools and businesses and entrepreneurial enterprises to get these kids connected. And I think that that's really awesome. It just tells me that there's energy in the state of Hawaii around moving forward and not backwards. Let's not go back to what we were doing before, which is, standard education that's been in place since the late 1800s, and all of the testing that goes with it, and that sort of college or bust mentality. And let's really think creatively about how kids can become involved in the workforce and start to gain experiences that will help them as they move forward. So I'm really stoked about that. And I think it says a lot about where we are here in Hawaii. I think that we as a state suffered, like every other state, from COVID. We did maybe better than other states in terms of keeping our COVID infection rates down and the death rate down, but we still suffered tremendously with our economy because it's so based on tourism, and we had to shut it down. And our schools just went through the same kind of hell that every other schools or school system went through during COVID around the United States. And so I'm excited because it feels like as we move through the summer of 2021, there's a lot of energy out there, public, private, and charter, and even homeschool, to not look back and to look forward and to really develop some new and interesting ideas about how to get kids ready to work in what's going to be a very, very different world as we move out of COVID and as some of the restrictions come down, as they already are. So it's cool. It's a great moment, and I'm excited about it. And I'm excited to play a part in helping some of those ideas gain traction as we go forward.
That is wonderful. Oh gosh. I something that's always been a amazing thing about Hawaii schools and about the teachers and about just in general about Hawaii is that you all do such an amazing job of bringing the community into the school system and really engaging the community around schools, and like with these businesses that are now going to work with high school students to fill this need, because very entrepreneurial. Here's this need. What can we do? Here's this school. How can we help? And that's something I think that is one of the hallmarks of Hawaii schools, and something you guys do so well, is bringing that together, because it really puts everybody in the boat rowing in the same direction. Right. And you're right. Things are not going to go back to where they were, nor should they. But it's nice to see that Hawaii is in whatever way, and we don't even know what that's going to be exactly yet, but moving forward and coming up with ways to say, okay, this was a horrible school year and then some, and how can we find the good pieces and move on and be even better than we were before? And I know Hawaii will do it. I know.
Well, I can actually give you another example. I'm just thinking about how we are getting a new superintendent. Our current superintendent is stepping out of her role, but she's remaining in Hawaii. But we're getting a new superintendent, and he's going to be interim for the next year as we look for a new public schools leader. His name is Keith Hayashi, and he's currently the principal at Waipahu High School. Keith has been a leader in something called the Academies Movement. And so what this is all about is that medium-sized and large high schools in Hawaii have developed academy models. Typically, there are 6 academies or 7 academies, and it might be, Engineering is one academy. Media and creative arts is another academy. Healthcare is another academy. And so the kids get the opportunity as they move through high school to join either one or two academies, and their classes focus on those academies. So they start moving through. They do get one opportunity to jump ship and go to another academy if it turns out, if I was in healthcare, for example, I decide, that's not really my thing. But I'm super interested in engineering. I can move over to engineering. So what we're seeing is that Keith Hayashi's idea of these academies is now starting to multiply across our public schools. So now there's a whole consortium of public schools on every island that's developing this academy model. And it means that more and more kids are getting an opportunity to really go deep while they're in high school in elements of business and entrepreneurship and in product-based learning and services and development and delivery of services. And so to know that he's going to be the interim superintendent is super exciting for everybody in my network because he's an incredibly innovative thinker. And it means that these ideas are going to have permission at the highest level to continue to develop. So again, it's another example of where during COVID, the innovative thinking didn't stop. People continued to move forward with these ideas. And now, Toy, there's some really interesting conversations developing around virtual academies. So imagine that this actually busts the bounds of any particular school and makes it possible for a kid who, let's say, if there was a virtual engineering academy that was run by one of the schools, that kids from other schools could participate in this virtual engineering academy, no matter where they are, whatever island they're on, because now we've really developed our muscles around using virtual technologies to be able to teach and learn, right? And so I really hope that this idea gains traction, and I think it will, because Keith is going to be at the top of the public schools for the next year. And I think it's going to give kids opportunities, especially in rural areas in Hawaii, the opportunity to do things that they might not otherwise have done pre-COVID. So anyway, it's just, as you can tell by my enthusiasm, I'm excited for the moment. And I think that there's just some great thinking that's going on here in Hawaii.
I love that. I love the idea of the academies and being able to really get and even the kids that jump ship, it's so important to know what you don't like.
Yeah.
And what you do like, and that opportunity to really figure that out early, because most of us still don't know what we want to be when we grow up.
Yes, that's right. That's right. I'm still not sure either. Yeah.
But I mean, I love that idea. And then being able to take things virtual where you might not have the expertise in one area, in one school, on one island, but you have the expertise somewhere else. And, maybe you have students and a facilitator that can help them and where there's not that expertise. I think that that's incredible. So I'm so glad for you. I'm so glad for the schools. Mm-hmm. And I might have to talk to this Keith fella and see.
Oh boy,
there's another one.
I would be happy to set that up. I think yes, exactly, for sure.
We love Hawaii. The only thing I don't like about talking to Hawaii people is that they say things like what you said. I wrote it down. Driving to my ocean swim.
Yes, like I apologize. Yes, I know.
I mean, you don't have to rub that in. Okay?
Yes, all right.
It's okay, you can. But yeah, and we might also, you mentioned Aaron Shorn earlier. We may also have him on here really shortly. So
that's great.
That'll be wonderful too.
Yeah.
This is great. I'm so glad to hear all of that. And I'm still waiting for my ticket to come out and see Hawaii schools.
I'll be there to greet you at the airport if you come to Hawaii.
And I want the trip like Ted Dintersmiths have, where I think I'm going for a couple of days and I end up staying for 3 weeks.
There you go. Yeah.
Awesome. So tell us about your production company. What's going on, and what's coming out of that? What has come out of that? That's exciting.
Yeah, so there's actually two things that have emerged out of Josh Reppun Productions, which still sounds really funny to say, by the way. It's just kind of weird to, but I figured, what the heck? You only go round once in life, so why not name your company after yourself? What the heck, right? So there are two things. One is that I just finished my second season of my podcast, which is called What School Could Be in Hawaii. Obviously inspired by Ted Dintersmith's book, What School Could Be, and also by his film from almost 6 years ago now, Most Likely to Succeed. Season 2 of the podcast was particularly challenging because of COVID. I know that you understand that as well as anybody, and all the podcasters out there know that it was quite a crazy thing to continue to podcast while in a lockdown. The last couple of episodes of season 1 I actually did in a studio, but with COVID protocols in place. But when we went into severe lockdown, I really had to not do that anymore and had to do my episodes remotely with guests calling in. And I was using Google Meet for that, which turned out to be a pretty good technology. And so I built myself a little home studio, got the equipment that I needed, and went ahead and did season 2. So there were a couple of tweaks to season 2. I was realizing that in my enthusiasm to ask guests every possible question under the sun, the episodes were getting a little bit too long. Some of them are creeping up north of an hour and a half. So in the second semester of season 2, I actually dialed it back and got a little bit more disciplined and kept the episodes to about an hour. But I was very pleased with the response to season 2. The numbers really went up. I think we're at about 23,000 downloads over 2 seasons. And I think I'm a little north of 65 episodes at this point. And the net effect, Toy, has been really interesting. In the beginning, it's very exciting when you get a few episodes up and the reaction is very positive. And my episodes are all about creativity and imagination and innovation and education. And I interview these epic teachers and education leaders who are leading the way here in Hawaii, and a few from the mainland as well. And so that's always a very exciting thing. But once you start to get a whole bunch of episodes in the can and you're building a real list, then things get very interesting. And I think the point that I've come to now at the end of season 2 is that I'm starting to realize a greater vision even than what I had when I started the podcast. And I'm going to paraphrase former President George Herbert Walker Bush, who used a term, 1,000 points of light. Now, I won't live long enough to do 1,000 episodes. That's not possible. But the idea that's emerging is that I am going to produce 1,000 points of light here in Hawaii. And that those points of light, again, switching metaphors, but if you look up at the night sky, what it really means is that we're changing the story about what's happening in education, public, private, and charter here in Hawaii. And that for many, many years, the stories that emerged were many times negative stories. They were stories that were born out of frustrations with teacher unions or frustrations with our legislature. They were mostly around air conditioning in classrooms and closing the achievement gap and things like that. And I think what I've been able to do over these 2 seasons and what I'm intending to do in season 3, starting in the fall, is to provide a corrective to that storyline. And as the 1,000 points of light emerge, a more accurate story emerges of who the people are that actually teach our kids here in Hawaii, again, public, private, and charter. And I'm really excited about that. And once you gain that threshold, then people start to go, okay, we really know what the mission and vision of this podcast is, right? And so when I ask people to be guests, they're like, I understand what I'm coming in to do. I'm nervous about it. I've never been interviewed on a podcast before, but I know what this is all about because I can see where he's going with this. He's providing a much more complete story of what education is all about in Hawaii. So that part is super exciting. And then I've also potentially got some partnerships that are developing for season 3. Hopefully, if things play out, it might be possible to get a little bit more of a production crew like what you have that could help me with the pre-production, production, and post-production work, which I'm doing all myself right now. It can get pretty crazy during a season, pretty intense. You know what it's like to get ready for an episode, right? There's a lot of work that goes into that. And so if I could get a little bit more of a production crew, I think that I might be able to focus a little bit more about on searching out where those points of light are on all the islands, on Lanai, on Molokai, on Maui, on Hawaii Island, and on Kauai, and we'll see where that goes. And then the second part to Josh Reppun Productions is a film, my second documentary film that I finished back in November called The Innovation Playlist. So I'll try to keep it brief, but there's a quick backstory behind this. So, I think for those who listened to your 40th episode with me, you know that where I got my start in all of this work was with Ted Dintersmiths and around his film Most Likely to Succeed, which I was one of the early screeners of that film here in Hawaii. And then after he came to Hawaii and I showed him what was going on here, and he finished his 50-state tour, he wrote his book, What School Could Be, which is the chronicle of that 50-state tour. And then he developed something called the Innovation Playlist, which is a wonderful set of resources for educators and education leaders in terms of developing small steps towards big change innovation. And I picked that idea up and the growing resource library and really ran with it here in Hawaii, especially with a number of schools on Maui and Molokai and on Lanai. And along the way, I came to this idea that it would make a lot of sense for me to make my own film about my work in the Innovation Playlist here in Hawaii. And Ted, as he always does, supported me and funded the development of the film. And I did it in partnership with a local high school called Waianae High School, which has something called Sea Rider Productions, which is one of the premier media production companies in the United States, all done by high school students and some visionary leaders here at Waianae. And so I did it in partnership with them. The kids that I worked with were the actual production crew, and they did all the filming. And so what ended up happening is that we chronicled elements of the Innovation Playlist that was created by Ted and his team at 5 public high schools here in Hawaii on 3 islands. It took 2.5 years to make this film. And I will admit that it got slowed down a little bit because of COVID, and a lot of the post-production work had to be done virtually over Zoom, which was difficult to do. But eventually, last November, I actually finished the film. And at the same time, Ted was finishing his project, which was creating an umbrella organization under whatschoolcouldbe.org. And when he saw the film, he just kind of flipped, which was pretty exciting. And he decided to house it at whatschoolcouldbe.org on the front page of that website. So if you go there and you go to the bottom, there's a section called Supporting Change in the Field. And my film is actually there, and you can watch it. And so again, it's called the Innovation Playlist. So I think the last thing that I would say, just kind of wrapping up this part, is that I have been able to screen the film virtually, these watch parties on YouTube, or actually doing it on Zoom now, both locally and nationally. I've actually been able to screen the film. And wow, Toy, the reaction was beyond all bounds. Anytime you make a film, the proof in the pudding is the reaction from the audience. You can think you've made a good film, but if the audience doesn't react positively, you haven't made a good film. And so the reaction from the audience, which has been mostly educators at this point, has been truly astonishing. And I think what they're seeing is themselves up on screen. And it's been at times been a very emotional reaction by people who are looking up and going, that's me up there. I'm doing those things. I'm doing those things on Kauai. I'm doing those things in Montana or in Louisiana or in Virginia or on Maui. And I feel very grateful to have had this opportunity to make this film. So for Josh Reppun Productions, the podcast and the film, it feels pretty exciting because it feels like we're moving closer and closer to these 1,000 points of light and really making a difference in terms of telling the real story of what's happening in education.
Wow. Yeah, I love that so much. That you're right. We spend, we go in circles sometimes with some of this infrastructure stuff and then what's wrong with education and where's the funding going
Yeah.
And it's hard. And it's hard to be like, teachers are people that sacrifice so much of not just their time, but like their families. And I mean, if you find a good teacher, like some of these folks that you've interviewed, that I've interviewed,
Yeah.
they are just, we could pay them $10 million a year. It probably wouldn't be enough money, like for what they do.
Agreed.
And it's just amazing that I'm glad that you've done that you're able to get your message out there, that like, here's what's right. Like, why don't we stop talking about what's wrong, what's broken? Let's start talking about what's right and lean into that more.
Right.
And I think as a nation, Hawaii leading the charge, but as a nation in general, I think if we did that, people would be a lot less quick
Yeah.
to jump on the what's wrong when they see these 1,000 points of light, which I think will probably turn into millions of points of light once this.
Yeah, for sure.
Because there are so many good folks out there doing amazing, incredible things, and they're hidden sometimes.
I can give you even a specific example. One of the people that I sent your way was Ian Kitajima from OceanEd. So he's not an educator, although he really is. He's the tech Sherpa for, our version of IDEO, OceanEd, that exists here in Hawaii. And so I think the larger point here is that every one of the people that I sent your way for your podcast, and all of the people who've been on my podcast, every single one of them pivoted during COVID. And they pivoted quite naturally. They just decided, here's a challenge. Let's address the challenge. How do we keep moving forward with the things that we were doing during this pandemic? So Ian is a classic example of how that worked. He didn't shut down at all. In fact, he ramped up during COVID and started developing virtual tours using Zoom technology, so that kids who were locked down here in Hawaii could actually do tours of entrepreneurial organizations and businesses here in Hawaii. So I think the first one that he did was actually OceanEd. So he was using cameras, mobile cameras, and Zoom, and walking through all the offices at OceanEd, where all these PhDs and amazing scientists were working on remarkable innovations, including a COVID test that they were working on, a rapid COVID test. And basically the kids got the opportunity to talk to these individuals in their workspaces on what they were working on. And I thought, wow, that was a pivot. I got to watch that as a fly on the wall during this Zoom call, and to watch the kids interact with these remarkable scientists who were rising to the challenge. What kid wouldn't want to rise to any challenge in the future after experiencing something like that? So I agree with you that those stories need to be told, and they need to be told even though they've happened already and are done already. I want to keep telling that story about Ian, because I think it could inspire other people to, in whatever situation, pandemic or no pandemic, whatever it is, to pick up the ball and run with it and do something a little bit different as a result of the challenge that's in front of you. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And I'm sure, Toy, that happened all across the country. I'm sure it happened in every corner of every state, that really interesting educators and education leaders figured out that this was a moment to rethink and to be challenged by what was happening, and to model that kind of thinking and those skills and habits and dispositions of the person who rises to a challenge in front of all these kids who are locked down. And now, as kids come out of lockdown and are moving back towards being in school again, it just feels like the culture, there's going to be there has been a cultural shift that's taken place, and we'd be crazy not to take advantage of it at this point.
Yeah, I mean, with anything this bad, with anything this bad, there's, what you really want to do is find the good in it. And now we are, at first it was a mess, but now we're so much more comfortable using this technology, and in a hybrid way, really, like what Ian is doing at OceanEd, and just the ability to access so much more and not have this block of it. I mean, it took a pandemic for us to get out of our own way, I think, in many respects.
I agree.
That it was just, like this block. Okay, well, this is the way school is, and it's within these walls, and that, well, yeah, and it's better. We need to be around people because we learn that. But but to be able to have that, but then also have this access to the world and things that are going on, and who knows, like somewhere in Germany that you could do a tour like what Ian is doing somewhere, I mean, anywhere. And the way that we can communicate and learn from other cultures and other people, I think if we really lean into that, it's going to be huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, I am curious, how are you organizing the virtual screenings? How are you getting that word out to people to screen the innovation playlist?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, towards the end of last year, November and December, I actually joined Ted Dintersmith's team as they were finishing up production or development and building of the whatschoolcouldbe.org community. So if your listeners want to know more about that, they can actually go to community.whatschoolcouldbe.org, or they can just go on their mobile phone to their App Store or Google Play Store and download the What School Could Be app. And so this is a virtual online community that's designed to connect educators from across the country. And now, as it turns out, we've got so many people who've joined that community from across the world that, in fact, they're people from East and West and in the United States. This community, my work in helping to build the community was to help get the word out about the community. But one of the other roles that I played was to actually do virtual screenings for members of the community. So what we did was we used, and if you go into the app or you go to community.whatschoolcouldbe.org, you'll see that there's a menu on the left-hand side, and one of those menu items is events. And so we created a series of events that were virtual watch parties of my film, The Innovation Playlist. So pretty easy to set up. You just have an event, there's a Zoom link, people put the event on their calendars, they RSVP for it. And Zoom, as it turns out, is a pretty wonderful way to actually show a film. And so for anybody who's doing that, when you share your screen and you click on share your audio, you get really good audio and video, and everybody's watching it at the same time. And you're in control of when the film stops and starts. So it's not like people are watching it separately. So I had these remarkable watch parties. And I think, Toy, there's two things I would love to say about this. One is that, for all of the years that we've had theaters, you went to a theater and you sat in the theater and you watched the film and you were quiet. And if you weren't quiet, people would give you dirty looks, In Hawaii, we would call it stink eye. You would get the stink eye, right? And so that's been our culture. I mean, even if it wasn't at a theater, if it was in a performing arts center at a school or a community center, whatever, you always watch the film mostly in the dark, quietly. And then if there was a discussion afterwards, you could have a discussion afterwards. And I remember long time ago, when I was teaching at La Pietra Hawaii School for Girls, there was a new technology that was developed called Today's Meet. And it gave you an opportunity to do what were called back channel conversations. So while you were watching something, you could have a back channel chat conversation with a group of people. And I thought, wow, this is a really interesting idea. There were some teachers who hated that idea because they wanted absolute listening, right? So the thing I want to say about, doing a watch party with Zoom is that the chat feature becomes a remarkable way to share ideas. So whether it's a film or whether it's a panel discussion or whether it's a speaker, whatever it happens to be, I'm learning that the chat function is a remarkable way to disseminate ideas. And I've come to believe that it's very possible for humans to toggle. We know brain science tells us that you can't multitask. There is no such thing as multitasking, but we do know that humans toggle very quickly between things. So one of the things that I learned as I was screening the innovation playlist is, wow, the chat was telling me so much about what the reaction to the film was in real time. I was getting very emotional reactions from people in the chat, and I was watching it, right? Then the second thing I wanted to share was, it's a very strange thing. If you go to a theater and you watch a film, you're looking at the back of everybody's heads. So you don't see the expressions unless you turn and look to the right or the left, which is always awkward because then people think you're, well, why are you looking at me, you creep? You know? Yes. So what I discovered when you screen a film using something like Zoom, you're actually looking at people's faces while they're watching a film or your film. And I learned two things. One is that people's facial expressions when they're watching a film are fascinating. And I never knew about them before because I was always looking at the back of people's heads, right? And the other thing that I learned, Toy, which was really neat, is when you watch somebody pick up a pen and start to take notes during a film that you've made, you've hit the mother lode. Like, that's when you know that you've done something that's worthy, right? It's like, oh my God, they're taking notes during my film. There must be something of value here. So anyway, so I kind of expected that the reaction to the film would be positive in Hawaii. I was certainly grateful that it turned out to be that way, but it was very unexpected for me to do these watch parties with people from, Nebraska and Virginia and Minnesota and Canada, to have them react to a film that's very much about Hawaii. Told me that I had reached some sort of universal threshold of ideas, that they were seeing ideas up on screen that really resonated with them no matter where they were in the world or in the country. So that was pretty cool. And I think I'm looking forward to a series of screenings that I'm planning on doing in real theaters with real people sitting really together, and starting a little bit later this summer and on into the fall. I think that's going to be pretty spectacular. But I'm very heartened by what I've learned by doing these virtual watch parties. And I think it does give people an opportunity to connect with others from around the nation or the world in ways that are not possible when you do in-person screenings. So it's pretty exciting stuff. Anybody can do it. Anybody can pick up a piece of film and say, I want to have a watch party with a bunch of you. So come, let's watch this film together, short, medium, long. We'll use the chat to get ideas out on the table, and we'll do a discussion afterwards. So it's a great thing that we've learned about Zoom type technologies.
I love it. I love it. Let's do an EntreEd watch party of your video.
Let's do it.
Do that.
Yeah.
That would be super fun. And it would be really great because I haven't seen some of my folks in so long. We're planning a thing this in July, which I'm so hopeful that we get the good attendance, just because I miss all my teachers. We haven't seen them, and it's crazy, but I think that they would really dig this. That's so cool, because I've never thought about the bonus of having the Zoom and being able to see people's expressions. But I've been in several groups for different reasons during this whole thing where I've been able to meet people and then stay in touch with them that I would have never in a million years have met otherwise.
Right.
They're just just some of the most interesting folks. Like I used to travel a lot. So I generally would have a buddy or somebody that I could hang out with when I went to whatever city, at least on the mainland.
Right.
But now it's just grown so much. Like I've met people all over the world, just in different forums I've been in different things for EntreEd, and it really is incredible how we can leverage this technology to help. But also super exciting that you can be back in person, because that's also something that we need as humans too.
I have another really quick story to tell. As a result of a virtual watch party that I did with, I was invited to screen my film in front of what's called the Hawaii State Teacher Fellows program. So these are 21 educators who are in a teacher leadership academy that's supported by our Hawaii Department of Education. And I know the facilitator of this program quite well, and she invited me to screen the film. So I did it virtually using Zoom to these 21 educators. 5 of them, and this is very much an entrepreneurship kind of a moment, who were 5 of these educators who were they were really inspired by the film. So they they sort of picked themselves up after the film was over and said, we should do a professional development course or create an offering for our fellow educators across the state of Hawaii that will run through this summer of 2021 and into the fall. And it'll be focused on the innovation playlist, on Most Likely to Succeed. And the book that they're going to be reading is What School Could Be. So in an incredible entrepreneurial moment, they just sort of picked themselves up and said, let's create this course. And they partnered with me and with a couple of other people, and they wrote the course and they presented it to the Department of Education. And I'm not sure that that's happened before, that educators have presented an opportunity like this. And the really cool part is that they sort of sensed that there might be demand. So they created a cap of 50 seats. So 50 teachers could go through this professional development program over the next 5 months or so. And then they put the offering up on the DOE's website, and within an hour, all 50 seats were gone. And it was just like, holy smokes, this is incredible. And so I love the idea that they just sort of said, wow, here's a film. It's inspiring. This gives us an idea for creating a course. Let's be entrepreneurial about this. Let's create this thing. And boom, up they did. They created it. And it just tells you that teachers, almost by nature, are creators. They're developers, they're designers. And we just got to get out of their way mostly to let them do that. So that was extremely gratifying for me that the film might have had that kind of effect on somebody. And we'll now I get to participate in the course itself and follow along as we go.
That
so
is
it'd be
so
pretty
cool. When does that start?
Already started already. They've already had their first meeting. We screened Most Likely to Succeed using Zoom. Had an incredible chat session during the film. It just blew up. People were so excited to see the film. And now they're in a 4-week period where they're starting to read the book. And they're using an app called Unruler, which is an app. It's called UNRLUR. I think I got that spelled right. And that it's an app that kind of mimics Instagram. And it was developed here in Hawaii. And it's a way to capture learning in real time over time, right? So instead of tests and papers or whatever, this is an app that allows you to capture learning using a sort of an Instagram type approach or a framework. So these teachers are going to be reading the chapters of What School Could Be, and they're going to be reflecting on these chapters, and all 50 are going to be reflecting on each other's reflections using the app. And so I'm going to be able to participate in that process, which is a real privilege. And then we're going to screen my film to them a little bit later in the summer. And then towards the end of the summer, Ted Dintersmithʻs and I are going to have a panel moment with them, or a Q&A moment with all 50 educators where we get to talk story with them. And then in October, they're going to do a public exhibition of learning where they're going to be developing curriculum, which is inspired by all of this process, including the innovation playlist. And those curriculum, they're going to present those curriculum in an innovation showcase to their fellow educators and the general public who are going to be invited into it. So how about that? Pretty cool. Yeah.
That is awesome.
Super exciting. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Wow.
A lot going on.
Oh my gosh, that has to give you like super goosebumps. I mean, that is that like, well, I mean, I was just on my last podcast, I was just talking to somebody about like the sparks, like these little embers that turn into sparks, that turn into flames. And that's how that works. Like your movie inspired, and then it's turned into this juggernaut, and with the potential to impact so many teachers and students and across Hawaii and across the nation. Wow.
Yeah, maybe at some point I'll be able to, I think it would definitely be a dream to travel maybe to the West Coast and to do a screening maybe in the Bay Area or something like that. And then to see how to do an in-person screening, and then to see how people would react to it and build some sort of a special session afterwards. It's only a 47-minute film, so it works really nicely in professional development settings. So hopefully I'll be able to do that. But there's so much work to do ahead, and it's very joyful work, and it's very exciting work to be thinking about doing. Yeah.
I love it. Well, wow. Well, I know that we're up against a time crunch a little bit, but is there anything else that you would like to add or advice you want to give to anybody? And please also then share how folks, again, can get in touch with you. We will put everything in the show notes. So don't worry if you're driving in your car, don't start writing things down.
Yes, please don't.
But if you could give us all of that information so that folks can check this out and find you and find out all the cool stuff that you're doing with your production company. And it's very exciting.
I think first of all, I would love to take you up on the idea of doing a screening, an EntreEd screening. And I think it would be really fun to invite your podcast guests from the past to be a part of that, because they are part of the 1,000 Points of Light. You and I are doing the same thing here. We're just elevating these remarkable people. One of my favorite podcasts right now is Guy Kawasaki's Remarkable People, which is, he's a Hawaiʻi graduate or high school graduate. And I think together we're creating models of innovation and creativity and imagination that are very inspiring and are having a real impact on people. We might not know it. We might not know exactly what's happening as a result of somebody listening to my podcast or your podcast. But we start to get these stories coming in, and it really means a lot. So I'm excited about that. I would love to do that. I would just encourage all your listeners, just think of this pandemic as a springboard to a whole new world, and think of it as a world where kids are going to be much more engaged in their learning. If we can really make some strides towards student engagement and learning, and de-emphasize some of this heavy testing that we've been going through over the last decades. I'm very encouraged by what the University of California system has done in terms of not using the SATs anymore for admissions. I think it's a big step towards portfolio assessment and developing artifacts of learning and a suitcase of artifacts of learning. So just keep moving forward, keep doing it. Keep seeking out the support of your administrators as you go forward. And I think together we are going to get to that 1,000 Points of Light. If you want to know more about the work that I'm doing, you can get in touch with me. My email address is mltsinhawaii@gmail.com. MLTS, of course, stands for Most Likely to Succeed. And I would be happy to engage with you. My Twitter handle is @MLTS in Hawaii or @Josh Reppun. And so that would be also a way to get in touch with me. You can direct message me. And if you want to see the innovation playlist, the film, by all means, you can access it. There's never a charge to see it. So you go to whatschoolcouldbe.org and go to the bottom of the homepage, and it's housed there. And that would be awesome. I would love your feedback if you have ideas for me about what I could do in terms of screenings, or even ideas about things that you heard or saw in the film.
Wonderful. Well, Josh, thank you so much for being here today. I'm just so blessed and grateful, and always a pleasure. There will be a Josh part 3, I promise.
I'm looking forward to it already. And thank you.
And we're going to talk about how cool the watch party was when we do it too.
Yes, that'll be the first thing we talk about when we get back together again.
Awesome.
Thank you, Toy, for all that you are doing to promote student engagement and learning and joyful learning and entrepreneurship and learning. What you're doing is spectacular. Well, I appreciate you.
Thank you. And back at you, everything that you're doing, it's really incredible. And I'm so excited for you and for Hawaii and for all of us that will get to experience this. So this is wonderful.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. And it's early where you are, so enjoy the rest of your Friday.
Thank you. Okay. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye, Josh.
Bye.